She opened her eyes and saw what the rest of us, no less unexpectedly, already saw. Jeanette strumming and plucking a cigar box guitar, out of which a damped, sotto voce seeming shell of sound emerged. Damped, sotto voce seeming shell notwithstanding, it advanced a hip, infectious ditty-bop rasp and reach, a viridentist huff. Jeanette's guitar sought annexation of pluck-inflected strum by thump-inflected unification, it said, with Aunt Nancy's bass. Jeanette, when she plucked, pulled the string out as far as she could and let go, letting it snap against the box to make a rattlish, raspy sound. She hummed, grunted, and moaned as she played, a sotto voce run of extenuated voice which brought Delta blues to mind. Even more, it brought Basumano Sissoko to mind, the old lion of Mali, the guitar sound more that of an ngoni than that of a guitar. Together, she and the guitar put forth a rolling, multiply pitched rumble, gruff and apparently offhand, but so exact it could not have come of considered application. They put forth an entwined sotto voce commotion that both spoke to and took a step farther, Aunt Nancy and the bass's antiphonal church. Aunt Nancy, nonplussed, albeit a bit taken aback, didn't miss a beat. She now not only strummed and thumped, but also plucked, snapping the strings and letting them buzz against the low end of the fingerboard. Her low-end buzz took up the guitar's ngoni-like rasp, consorting with it for a long enough stretch to become its escort, a fuzzed, otherwise ictic escort, limiting a wider aisle in a now much larger church. She somehow managed to work into the strumming, thumping, and snapping a steady 4-beat walk Leroy Vinegar would have been proud of. A walk she implied instead of stated outright as often as not. Its implicit feet felt in the strum, thump, or snap she interrupted it for. She and Jeanette were the true heroines of ictic tendency, spooked apostles of a first tabernacular itineracy, antiphonal kin whose blue devotions mourned a felled or, if not yet felled, feeling body, the church's first and most reliable house. This was the annexation Jeanette sought. She and Aunt Nancy now walked as one, an ictic promenade which acquired a crab-like meander and drift. Her cigar box guitar seemed a diminished cautionary doppelganger to Aunt Nancy's bass, a ghost, or better, poltergeist of a claim to connection. She too, that is, now widened her repertoire, now not only strummed and plucked, but also thumped, rapping the box with her thumb and the knuckles of her third and fourth fingers. The sotto voce falsetto she now and again got into so lent itself to such thumps it seemed she tapped at a seance table. It was a rough-cut, mystical side of Jeanette we don't often see. Aunt Nancy's bass solo was now clearly something else, a lank, double-jointed duet which, loose and on speaking terms with lateral drift, made its availability or amenability to other voices abundantly clear. Penguin was the first to so avail himself. He quickly slipped backstage and returned with a broom he'd evidently noticed earlier, an old-fashioned cornstalk broom. He came back on stage holding like a guitar, strumming like a guitar. He seemed intent on reminding us that the guitar the balloons told of was strung with straw, not fishing cord. He ran his fingertips across the cornstalk straws and extracted what sound he could, an even more diminished, meager ghost of a sound than what came out of Jeanette's guitar, a sotto voce flirtation with voicelessness which, like the guitar, but even more so, put one in mind of an ngoni. He made his way back to the mic and held the strummed straw part of the broom close to it, signaling to the fellow working the mix at the back of the room for more volume. That helped some, but it was still a forced, meager sound, pointedly hoarse and laryngitic, mostly gesture, if not all gesture, ictic tease. Whenever he left off strumming, he plucked, taking a straw between the nails of his thumb and his forefinger, part mime, part makeshift mudra, pulling it out and letting it go, and exacting a clipped, anticlimactic pinch of sound. There was next to no snap, Absolutely no buzz. Penguin advanced the philosophic rapport with deficit sound, if not with outright lack of sound. So measly and pinched, so miserly or deprived were the dry pricks of sound his plucking produced. It seemed he scratched at the straw for sound, strained at eking what sound out of it he could. A thirsty man on a desert scratching water from sand, he stood elated at the daunting odds he faced. He strummed and plucked, elated, oddly geared up. Strumming's dry ripple of sound in concert with plucking's dry pricks of sound introduced a thread of dry humor as well, a philosophic, self-deprecating thread seeking leverage on Drenette and Aunt Nancy's churchical exchange, urging them to lighten up, but not without designs on churchicality itself, no sooner urging them to lighten up than advancing its own blue-ictic amen. Several people in the audience laughed. Fierce, funny, desperate in its odd, elated way, Penguin's broom contributed an element one felt was absolutely apt, notwithstanding one would not have known it belonged had it not been there. Jamila was the second to avail herself of Drenette and Aunt Nancy's crab-wise aisle, the widening promenade of prospect that all the more showed itself able to accommodate any and all who'd come, having found room for Penguin's wry blue-ictic sachet. At the piano, she took a monkish tack, issuing plinks, anxious plunks, hesitant fills, gradually building up to note to longer runs. She added to Aunt Nancy and Drenette's percussive thumps by stomping her foot every now and again, sometimes her left, sometimes her right, lifting her leg and letting it hang for the time it took to conclude a phrase, bringing her foot down hard on the floor to announce and reinforce having come to the end of the phrase. She had a way of delaying the final note of the phrase, leg suspended, not hitting it until a microbeat after her foot came down on the floor. A shade late in coming, the note had been held up, it seemed, by some impediment, stomping her foot on the floor dislodged. She'd angle her body when she lifted her leg, leaning to the right and away from the piano when she lifted her left, to the left and away from the piano when she lifted her right. She, too, it took no genius to see, sought leverage, an oblique, dislocating fulcrum furthering her own blue-ictic stroll, pianistic strut. Stride and strut were decidedly what she built up to. The others picked up on this, each greeting every impeded note she stomped her foot to free with a micro-beat hitch and a shade-late reinforcement of his or her own, an explosive thump from Aunt Nancy's bass, an impulsive pluck from Drenette's guitar, Straw's abstract snap, or extrapolative snap, from Penguin's broom. These became more staggered, dispersed, strewn about as things proceeded, microbeats and more intervening among stomp, thump, pluck, and snap. The blue-ictic aisle became an eruptic expanse in which, hiccup-like, these detonations took one another by surprise. This was the expanded, eruptive aisle Lambert now stepped into. Not with his horn, it turned out, but to dance. He drew abreast of the aisle's blue-ictic tread, its resonant walk, starting off with a pointedly long stride to the center of the stage. Once there, he extended his arms in front of his body, hands hanging limp, the classic or stereotypic sleepwalker's pose, though his eyes remained open. His arms were extended for balance, one soon saw, as he now leaned back on his heels, letting the front of each foot come up off the floor. His heels alone touching the floor, his legs locked at the knee and at a 75-degree angle with the floor, he proceeded to step in time with the music, walking backwards in a counterclockwise circle. Lambert's dance endlessly bordered on imbalance, warded off imbalance. He ran a constant risk of leaning too far back, a risk he fought or compensated for by constantly adjusting and readjusting the position of his upper body, fought or compensated for with the quickness of his feet. His backwards walk was a levered appeal to curved earth, a conserving abandon he sought to enlist or to align himself with.